Hey y'all, what is up? My name is Hawaya. Thank you so much for checking out my channel, clicking on this video. So I was filming a vlog. I do not know if I'm going to include this in the vlog or if I'm gonna just upload it as its own video. Your girl I'm currently living in a shelter. I decided to give up my home that I had back in Louisiana, and I literally, like on a whim, packed up my car and I moved to the East Coast. Currently living in Pennsylvania, and like I said, we're living in a shelter. Spirit was downloading to me, guiding me and telling me that I needed to look into the history of the area that I am in. And upon doing that, I came across some very interesting facts. I found out that George Washington, after becoming president, he uprooted his family and his slaves, and they moved from Virginia to a town not far from where I am in Pennsylvania. And at that time, in the state of Pennsylvania, residents here, you lived here for more than 6 months, you were able to get your freedom. He, however, would alternate and move his slaves around constantly so that they would never be, no one slave would ever be in this state for longer than 6 months, so they could never be free. Upon coming across this info, I came across one of the slaves, her name, and it was just very interesting to say that. It was very interesting. And then I started being guided to look into the history of the house that I am currently living in, the shelter, which is a historic mansion that I believe was built somewhere in the 1700s, late 1700s, but I don't know if for a fact because I literally cannot find anything on this house. And then from there, I was led to looking into my family's ancestry through Ancestry. I am from the Deep South, and I'm just being honest, I don't know much about my family history. Y'all know they do and did keep record and track of the slaves. A lot of it was not public record, at least not in the area where we lived. They would keep it for their own records. My uncle, who I ended up calling when I was like on the Ancestry DNA and like finding all this information, he told me that he worked at our town's sugar mill, Sterling Sugar's our town sugar mill, and he said that he would remember at the time that he was working there, a lot of their documents and records, he said they would keep like locked in a safe. And he said that there were plenty of other people, they would have these conversations all the time, obviously, because we know that our ancestor built and worked sugar mill, as well as they were the ones who worked that land, right? So he said they would have conversations, him and his co-workers would have conversations like these all the time, right? Okay, so now I was very aware that I was breaking some sort of generational curse in my family, that I am the chosen, the awakened. I was very well aware of that, but I was not aware of how deep it ran. So a little backstory. I was not raised by my mom. My mom was addicted to crack cocaine from before I was born until I was 21 years old, where she suffered a stroke that started off when she first had the stroke. She was actually brain dead on the left side of her brain. With time, she was able to get or gain some of that back. However, her speech is impaired. Her I guess long-term memory is impaired. She was able to regain her ability to walk, but she walks with a cane and with the limp, and she never regained usage of her right arm or hand. So that's the background for my mom, and I was aware and I knew that my grandma was not raised by her mom, because my great-grandma had my grandma when she was very young, somewhere around the age of, I believe it was somewhere between 11 and 13. I don't know the for sure age, because again, because of the area that I am from, that type of stuff, like those records were not kept, so we don't really know. No one knows for sure the year that my great-grandma was born, but I know she had my grandma around, like, between the ages, like I said, of 11 and like 13. And I don't know if it was because she was so young when she had, I'm sure that's the reason why she was so young when she had my grandma. They were raised as or coming up, I'm sure they were raised more as siblings than as mother and daughter. I did not know, upon looking into my ancestry, I was not aware of the fact that my great-grandma was also not raised by her grandma due to her mom. My great-great-grandma died giving birth to my great-grandma. So my great-grandma was raised by, I believe, her aunt. That aunt went on and who raised my great-grandma. Okay, I was not aware of this. I did not know this. Okay. And upon, like, me getting this download and me stumbling across this information, it led me to getting into, like, this place of I already had kind of accepted, like, my mom's, you know, backstory and her not being there for me and my siblings. I have 3 brothers. Me and my first brother are a year and 5 days apart, and we were raised in the same house. But my 2 younger brothers were raised by another family member, because again, like I told y'all, my mom was on drugs. So I kind of, you know, of course I struggled with that. I struggled with the acceptance of that. I struggled with my mom, with forgiving. I struggled with forgiving my mom for that. I struggled with dealing with that in general, right? Going through those emotions, the feeling, the neglect, the abandonment, the anger of my mom choosing a substance over her children, right? So I had already, the past couple of years, come into that place where I started to forgive and started to look at my mom as a woman versus looking at my mom as my mom, right? And that's the thing, I think, with a lot of us, especially if you're on your, like, a spiritual journey, you come to that point where you realize, you know, your parents, like, yeah, they are your parents, but they aren't the way that they are for no reason, whether that's good or bad. For a lot of us on this spiritual journey, it's a lot of things and a lot of ways, you know, we wish our parents weren't or didn't have certain traits, right? But I think as you become more evolved spiritually, you start to look at, you know, you look at your mom as a woman versus your mom. You start looking at your dad as a man versus just your dad. You start to have compassion for the things that they have been through, or the things they must have gone through for them to be the way that they are. Already kind of in that place. I've dealt with, like, all of the emotions beforehand with my mom, so I kind of accepted it for what it was, you know. But upon coming across all of this information, I started to really understand how deep-rooted this generational curse was. My great-grandma not being raised by her mom, my grandma not being raised by her mom, and also Also, the reason my grandma was not raised by her mom, because I know some people are like, well, yeah, she raised her young, but eventually I'm sure they would have whatever. And the reality is they had a relationship, but it was never that mother-daughter relationship. My great-grandma ended up meeting a man who came to our town from a different area, different part of Louisiana, to work in the cane fields. You know, that's, well, if y'all don't know, that's seasonal work. Farming is seasonal. So he would come, like he was there during the farm season. I'm assuming they met, they fell in love, and when the season was over, he went back to his hometown, and my great grandma went with him. She did not take my grandmother with her. She left my grandma to be raised by my grandma's aunt. And I don't know if it was an aunt or a great aunt, but it was an aunt. And she never came back for her. My great grandma ended up getting married. She went on to have 12 more children, and she never came back for my grandma. I remember my grandma having these conversations with me, which is how I know this. And now, I'm trying not to cry just thinking about this. Now when I look back at those conversations that she and I had, I feel like the hurt that she must have felt. Because I remember her telling me, like, she would, like, my great grandma she would come back to, you know, to visit her family or to visit their family, and my grandma said that every time she would come, she would have another kid, and it would be another kid, and she would be pregnant. My grandma was like, they had like the like traditional like station wagon. My grandma would be like, it was like always like full of like nothing but kids, you know. But she never took my grandmother with her. Now, I don't know if, I mean, I guess I'll never know the reasons for why she didn't. I don't know if it was because my grandma's aunt wouldn't let her take her, or if it was because my grandma didn't want to go. But I'm assuming that it couldn't have been because she didn't want to go, because I feel like my grandma had those conversations with me, and I feel like she would have told me that, but she never told me that, right? My great grandma, like I said, she got married. She literally had 12 other children, and they lived about an hour and a half away from where we lived, and they would occasionally come to visit, but that was as much as it. Did not ever go any further than it. And y'all, I could go deeper into the struggles, because I was raised by my grandparents, my grandma and my grandpa, and I struggled with my relationship with my grandma for a very long time. Like, in our household, my grandma was the disciplinarian. She was the strict one. My grandpa was a Pisces. He was very soft-spoken. He had very few words, or at least to other people, that's how he came across. But he was the compassionate one. He was the soft one. He was the one that, you know, when me and my brother would come home from school, he was the one that we would run to like talk about our day and tell what happened. And, you know, it was my grandpa. It was not my grandma. And I viewed her growing up, she was just very like mean, very like strict. I could probably count on one hand how many times she told me she loved me. I could probably count on one hand how many times I can remember. Like, I don't remember hugging her that often as a child. I don't, like, she wasn't the type that told you she loved you with words. It was very much, you know, like, I'm raising you, so of course I love you. You know, it was very much like that. I tell you that coming across this information made me realize, because I have had anger for so long with being a single mom, the anger and the pain and the frustration that I have felt since I was pregnant, since being pregnant with my twins, because their dad, I went through my pregnancy alone. I had my family, but for the most part, I went through that alone. And I had a friend, me and her are not friends anymore, who was there for me, but their dad was not there. He never was at a doctor's appointment or an ultrasound, and I went to them very often. I was literally at the doctor every week, between my regular doctor, and then I had to go to like a specialist because I was carrying multiples that automatically put me at high risk. So I had between the high risk doctor, my doctor, and then me having to go constantly for ultrasounds, I was literally always at the doctor. I still have scar tissue in my arms for how many times I got stuck with needles, because of like how much blood work they would have to do on me, because again, I was considered high risk because I was carrying multiples. But he was not there, and I went through that alone. And after they were born, he was there very briefly, and I do mean very briefly, and then he was not there. So I went through that alone, and my baby girl, who is 1, her dad, it was the same thing. The thing about that though was that her dad was the one who wanted me to have her. He wanted a baby. I already had kids. I already knew what the single mom struggle was. I wasn't trying to do this shit again. But he wanted her. I didn't. I contemplated abortion. And I mean, literally the day that my abortion was scheduled, the world shut down. So I could not have it. And after, it seemed like from the moment I told him that I was keeping her, he was just determined to just not be around, to constantly let me know that I was not shit. He had gotten, by the time we were in a relationship when my daughter was conceived, or at least in my brain, I thought we were in a relationship. Now I know that was not so. But he moved on, he got into another relationship. By the time I told him I was keeping my daughter, he was literally living with another woman. And if y'all know anything about abortions, then you know, baby, if you're gonna do an abortion, that process is fast. So it wasn't like this was months later. Like, no, he was living with another woman, taking care of this woman and her kid. And it's like every time me and him would have a conversation about anything, he would throw in my face this other woman. He would throw in my face how, you know, that was his family and he loved his family and he was not gonna be with me. But he also was not there. He never was at a doctor's appointment. He never called me to see anything dealing with the doctor's appointment. I did have hyperemesis gravidarum while I was pregnant with her. I threw up literally every day, all day for 9 months. My whole pregnancy, he was absent. I ended up in the ER a couple times from dehydration, from not being able to keep food and fluids in my body. So I would have to go and get IVs. I would call him, he would be unconcerned. And after I had her, it was the exact same, and it is still the exact same now. And the anger and the pain and the resentment that I have been harboring in my body from having to raise these 3 kids alone and by myself, I didn't even realize like how angry I was. But finding out that information and like really doing that shadow work and like really like coming to terms with how deep rooted within my family women not raising their own children women not being present with their kids, leaving that for someone else to do. I now realize why my path has been my path as a parent. I guess I was kind of like predestined to do this alone. I don't feel like I'm going to be alone forever. I know for a fact I will not. But I have been. My twins just turned 6, so it's been 6 years. And I am releasing myself from those shackles. I am choosing to release myself from those shackles. That cycle ends with me. And the fact that I've come to the realization that the reason why it's been so hard for me is because I am like the only woman in my immediate family who are raising their kids. Like, I mean, every day, day to day, like, I am the first in my family for, like, my immediate family for, like, generations to be doing this. And I don't even know what to say. Because for so long I was looking at it like I was so angry with myself. I was angry with my kids' dads. I was angry and I was bitter and I was frustrated. And more so, the anger was really at myself, you know? Because I was not in a relationship with my twins' dad. If I'm being honest, my kids were created out of lust. They were not created out of love. And I felt like I had accumulated some sort of like bad karma because of that. Like, I looked at it as that being my curse. And now that I realize and I understand it, it's really my blessing, you know? Like, it's really my blessing, and it's a curse that will end with me, and for that I am grateful. So if you are a single mom watching this and you have been struggling with the anger against your kids' fathers, you've been struggling with the acceptance, you've been struggling with, you know, accepting your role that you played in it. Because even me admitting that like my children were really created out of lust and not love, even that, it feels freeing to say out loud because it's the truth. It's so many of us out here that are like that. Kids whose parents were not together when their moms got pregnant. Kids whose parents, you know, are co-parenting. Parents who struggle or don't co-parent. You know, moms who hate their kids' dads, and they, you know. So even me admitting that, like, I feel like a weight has just been lifted off of my spirit. If you have been struggling with that anger as a single parent, that hardship, that coming to grips with the reality, I really like urge and encourage you to start to dig deeper. Like, because you're not we are not on this journey for no reason. Nothing is a coincidence. Literally, nothing is a coincidence. So, yeah. that's all I wanted to say, y'all. I don't even know how to end this video, but if you are a single mom and you have been, like I said, struggling, you're not alone. And I know it feels like hell, and it feels like you was dealt a bad hand, and it feels like the whole world is against you. Nobody has compassion, nobody understands. I feel like the moment you start to release the guilt and the shame that you first put on yourself for being in this situation, and you shift that, your perception, I feel like that's really the key to shifting and changing the narrative. So I didn't mean for this video to be this long. I thought it was gonna be quick, but I guess not. Like I said, I hope that it helps somebody out there. Me putting this out there helps someone. So thank y'all so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye, y'all.